Okay, this is a brief video on the types of endings for your creative short stories. You have 5 types of endings that are available to you, and these are all listed on your note sheets, but quickly, you have the barely there ending, the real life ending, the surprise ending, the classic ending, and the epilogue. So those are your choices. You want to tailor the ending of your story to one of those. Okay? So let's give you a couple examples of what we've got available. First, if you take a look at Dark They Were and Golden Eyed, you can see on page 11, all right, just by how it's set up, you have the classic break here, the lapse in text with the line gap, and then the transitional phrase 5 years later. So you have that transitional phrase that tells you right there that this is an epilogue ending, because if you look at it, this comes after the story has ended. All right, it could be months or years after the story ended, like a revisit to see how things are going for a character, and that is the quintessential example of Dark They Were and Golden Eye. So that is one example, okay, and that is an epilogue ending. Another story that we have is A Sound of Thunder. And you could argue a few different endings cover this one. You could say, well, it's the real life ending, but I would argue that this is actually the surprise ending because it's a twist. It's not what was expected by the reader. Very few people actually expect that Eccles is going to be murdered, which is what Travis does to him. All right, so if you look at that, you've got a twist ending. It's not what's expected by the reader. You use it when the story is intended for audiences that like puzzles. The story sets up clues as to what will happen, or the surprise is truly a surprise. And I would argue that in this story, number 2, the story sets up clues as to what will happen. Travis makes threats. Okay. You could also argue because of the role with President Keith and the repetition of his name, that that's another clue that it's going to happen. Some would argue that it's the classic ending because the climax comes at the end of the story with little to no falling action. Okay, yeah, you could argue that, and I don't think you'd be wrong. So those are 2 examples of the stories that we have that follow those types of endings. So now your job is to decide which one you want to use. Before I cut off, I want to give you a couple suggestions when you go about either fixing your ending or creating one. And they're located on your note sheet that I've given you. I want you to know a couple things. First, don't write more than you need to. If you've written a 2-page story, you don't need to write an ending that is another page itself. Okay, be proportionate to the rest of the story length. If you have a 5-page paper and you write 2 or 3 paragraphs, that's fine. Okay. But you also have to keep in mind what is the focus of your closing, your ending. Number 2, relocate the story to a different place and time. You want to be careful with that because you want it to fit. So if you are going with the jump ahead in time ending where you have an epilogue, be careful with that because that could be a whole other story on its own. Okay? But you also want to keep in mind for number 3, offer something new to your audience, like an insight, a consequence, or a different perspective on the story's events. That's a nice little trick to pull because you want to get them excited. You want them to start thinking and pondering and going, wait, did I miss something? And have them go back and reread. So if you give them an insight, maybe you've changed the perspective, maybe you're writing it as a narrator, maybe you're writing it as another character, but this is what you want to do. You want to give them something new, but you don't want to confuse them. So think about that, and we'll go from there.